All right. So if you look at your agenda right in front of you, we have topic one, the lifting of the mask mandate. This is just more of like an informative thing. I'd say at the high school, the mask mandate being lifted has been going pretty well. There haven't really been any serious issues. I'd say it's about like a 60-40 split with like 60% of kids keeping their mask on, 40% not. And yeah, it was just a quick little briefing. If anybody else has anything they'd like to add, any comments about the mask mandate? You?
Maybe like it's going pretty well. I thought there would be like a lot of like, I don't know, not like bias, but like people getting mad at each other if you're wearing it or not wearing it, but it's actually gone pretty smoothly in my opinion. I think it's been pretty good.
Also to add, I feel like people like the option that it's optional, so you can choose to wear it if you still want to, and then if you don't want to, then you can also choose not to.
So just for verification, you said 60% are wearing and 40% are not, correct?
Yeah, but that's just like a rough estimate.
No,
I don't have numbers. Yeah,
but that's interesting.
it's about
Okay.
split. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, that was just very quick. The second topic has to do with Wi-Fi issues that happened last week, March 7th to the 11th. We were having issues where kids really just couldn't get on the internet at all. And I just had questions about what exactly the cause was and what steps are being taken to prevent such a thing from happening again.
So last week we had a failure of a firewall, and so that caused the disruption. Our IT department worked with professionals outside of the school department who were professionals in the tech areas, right? And we tried to bring back up the firewall. We tried a lot of different things to try to solve the problem. That was day one, so it was intermittent, right? Because we tried to do something that was suggested to repair it, and then we would see a failure shortly after everyone started logging back on. So what we did was we had to invest in a new firewall and then move everything from the existing firewall to the new firewall. So that happened on Thursday, and that we saw significant delays in being able to access Wi-Fi on Thursday because we were doing all of that work, and we did that till very late in the evening. And then on Friday, we were back up. So, and again, it's all new now, so hopefully that has solved the problem. I think this week's been pretty good. So we're pretty confident that we fixed the problem and we should be good till the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Sorry, Mr. Dakota.
Thank you. I have a quick question about what happened. Has there been any conversation pertaining to Where was the firewall in terms of like, where did that occur? And was there a conversation about compartmentalizing every school building within the network to prevent from all of them coming crashing down?
So actually, we had anticipated that the firewall was probably not going to last till the end of the year. We actually had a plan to roll over to a new firewall at the end of this week, and so we just had to move that forward a week. So we do anticipate these challenges. Our IT department is very, very good. We service a lot of devices every day, all day long. And so they're always working with outside consultants and professionals. They're always looking to upgrade. And behind the scenes, we upgrade things before we have failures. And this just happened to be one of those times where it just got ahead of us. But like I said, we were prepared. We were planning the conversion for months, actually. So those are the behind-the-scene things that you don't know necessarily.
Thank you.
I'm just curious to see if you guys noticed more conversation in school, or like less people trying to like paying attention to their phone or anything. I know people have cellular, but I wonder what it's like without Wi-Fi, because people used to talk and no one used to know what Wi-Fi was.
I'd probably say that, yeah, there was a lot more conversations and a lot more like writing on paper with pens, which is something we haven't done in a while, so that was kind of nice. And then my question was, is there any like better plans set in place because of this, like that wouldn't take as long as a week, like if this happened like again? Like any preventatives for that?
As I said, behind the scenes, we're always doing upgrades and making changes so that we have better speed, we have better connectivity. We did not actually have the problem with the firewall till Wednesday. Thursday it was down, and Friday it was back up and working. So it should have only been, Thursday was a day of interruption, Wednesday was intermittent. So, you know, as I said, we always are planning well in advance ways to upgrade our systems and implement them. And oftentimes, most of the time, people aren't even aware that that's happening. So this was unusual. We don't typically have interruptions like that throughout the school year.
Well, I don't know if this is like a tech thing, but would anything like on Monday and Tuesday it wasn't working great either? So could that have been because the firewall was like gonna fail or something?
Yeah, I don't know. We rely on in the buildings, teachers and staff filling out what we call a ticket. So they go online, a help desk ticket, right? I think you all maybe can do it if your Aspen password is no longer working, right? And so oftentimes we have to rely on staff putting in a ticket and then us diagnosing sort of what's going on, right, depending. So if that was the case, you know, we may not even have been aware of it until we got some notification from the schools that things weren't working well.
Thank you.
Just one more question. Was this a district-wide issue or just a little high issue? District-wide? Oh, okay, sounds good. And you said that with the upgrade to the firewall, that's like what's being used to prevent it or such a situation from happening again. Okay. Sure, sounds good. Thank you so much for your help with that stuff. It was weird. I remember in my A-push class, we were filling out like a map of like the 50 states and their capitals, which is something that we didn't do and we never really did, and it actually took a lot of collaboration and talking with the kids at my table. Mr. Dakota.
It could have been worse. Could have been doing it in the middle of MCAS. Just think about that, like the chaos that would have been.
That would have been tight. I just have a question. Do you think this new firewall will probably last till the end of the school year, or do you need another one? Okay.
Yeah, it should be a long-term solution. Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Any other comments or questions? All good? Okay. We'll move to 1.3, metal detectors and safety concerns. I remember it was Monday, I think, if I remember correctly, that I received like a photo from one of my friends of metal detectors coming into the high school. It was today where I actually like saw them when I walked in. It wasn't like placed or like set up to like be used, but it was just in like the back next to the stairs. And then I saw a message saying that the metal detectors weren't necessarily going to be used like immediately or constantly. It would just be used in the event that there was sort of like a threat given to the school, obviously to prevent bringing weapons into the school for our safety. And the question's more directed or framed regarding the safety of our students. Are there any safety concerns that we're not aware of that prompted the use of metal detectors? More of what exactly prompted the purchase of these metal detectors?
Yeah, so this was a recommendation from the Lowell Police Department. These are actually part of overall, they're called school safety kits. So it's a set of equipment that we have available now to us, whatever the level of threat or concern that the police department might let us know. So most of you are juniors or seniors. So if you think through all of your K through 12 experiences, how many times did you see that there was a threat of a gun on campus or there was a threat of a shooting? Fortunately, we're very, very fortunate here in Lowell. That has never come to fruition. But whenever there's a threat, we've got a responsibility, and the Lowell Police Department has a responsibility to make sure they take every precaution possible. So what this does is it gives us more tools. So that way, if something like that occurs, and it could be public, something that you're aware of, or it could be something that comes into the police department that they're aware of, it allows us to be able to support you and your families by saying, we're taking every possible precaution here. There's a concern here, a heightened risk, that now we have the tools and the technology available to use. So the recommendation from the police department was make sure we have all of the tools at our disposal, and these were part of a school safety equipment purchase so that all of those tools are available, so whatever the risk is that's assessed, if it's assessed that there is a risk level that we want to make sure we take extra precaution, we'll do that. So you haven't seen them used because we haven't had that level of risk yet, but we might. And I think if you reflect back on your kind of schooling career, you can probably think back to times where you say, yeah, probably in that instance it might have been used. You can think back to any kind of scenario. Fortunately, we haven't had that yet. These are kind of new purchases for us in collaboration with the police department, but we work in partnership with the police department. Sometimes they're aware of threats. Sometimes the threats are regional. Sometimes they're statewide. There was one instance here that you might recall this fall, I want to say, where it was almost nationwide, where it was going through social media. Do you recall that? Where there was every school, every high school, at least on the East Coast, was under heightened security, heightened threat awareness. Those would be the times where you might utilize something like this. And then we put them in place as a precautionary measure because we really believe that all of our kids are here to do the right things, and we want to make sure we can protect you so that you can go to school well. Kyla?
I just have a clarifying question, I guess, to the superintendent. Are they only at the LeBlanc? I mean, are they only at the high school, and does the LeBlanc have a metal detector also, being a high school, I guess?
These are mobile units. So actually, depending on what we get in terms of advisory from the police department, we're able to mobilize the equipment. So they're not stationary equipment, which is likely, Chris, you'll probably see them aside. They're probably being right now stored and inventoried and assessed, maybe even tested over there because our school resource and police officers are stationed at Lowell High School. So they might be over there testing the equipment, might be storing the equipment, but they're mobile, committee member Del Rossi, and they can be mobilized wherever the police department advises.
Thank you.
Have they taken into consideration that, like, if we did have to use these, that the metal detector would be going off constantly because every laptop has metal in it?
We are aware. There are a good number of high schools around the country that use these daily. So there are pretty standard protocols for how we utilize them, and yeah, that's one of them. If you think about it, some of you may have gone through metal detection in the airport, and you put your school supplies. They all go in one bin. They're viewed differently, and then you walk through the metal detector. So the metal detector helps you for something that somebody might be trying to hide.
So would they be used like that, similar like to an airport where you put your school bag on something like that?
That's probably the best analogy, or if you've gone to a Celtics game or something along a large concert venue, same type of concept.
Thank you.
So I have a two-part question, I guess, and this is to the superintendent as well. What is the process to train the students the process that they're going to be going through? Because it sounds as if you're saying this is only going to be used incidentally. So if that's the case, how are the students going to be prepared for that? What are the parents being, what are the students being prepared for? What are the parents being told so that they can prepare their child for it? I know for some people, just the process of going through a metal detector, if they've had certain situations, could be traumatic. So I'm just curious what the processes for those situations.
I think those are really valid points, and I'll make sure that I take those notes and I can get back a report to the committee if you're okay with that, Ms. Thompson.
Just wanted to ask a question too. I heard that there was an email that got sent out today. So are these metal detectors also going to be used at sporting events like the football games and basketball games, but also open house events at Lowell High?
So they are mobile. So we have access to them now where we can utilize them where we think they're necessary. Again, our schools, our learning environments, our sporting events, we want these to be welcoming environments and also safe environments. So some of what Committee Member Thompson was saying, we want to be judicious in our use of these, but we'll be doing them in partnership with the Lowell Police Department. So our schools are microcosms. They're smaller aspects of our community as a whole. So depending on what's going on within our community at any given time, we certainly I could foresee that the police department might call and say, this might be a time that we utilize them. So we have a school safety team that works in collaboration with the police department. And I think anything's a possibility. It's making a decision about that balance of making sure everything feels welcoming for all of our families while we can ensure 100% certainty that you're as safe as can be. And that's the balance that I'll always have to consider as I work to make those decisions. But I think any of those possibilities that you might think of, any time, and again, you guys are juniors and seniors, you can think through any time where you might have heard something, had a concern, where you can think this might have been a useful tool at that time. Those are the times that we'd probably use these.
I have a question. Is my mic already on? So I have a question. I was just thinking, is this, so like let's say there was an incident at Lowell High, would it be security who's handling the metal detectors, or would it be Lowell Police who would be?
It would be in partnership with, so it'd be our security team in partnership with Lowell Police, the same way that you see security, our security staff, and you also see school resource officers, I would imagine, and you should be seeing more of our security staff than you're seeing police officers. So there's greater security staff. It would depend on the circumstance, but we would expect that it would be our school security staff largely managing these, the security staff that you're familiar with that you know, but it would also be supported by Lowell Police, and it would depend on the circumstance as well. We always say here, we feel like we are extremely safe here in Lowell, and we have the good fortune of living in a safe community, but we're within a nation here where we see these types of things, unfortunate and tragic events, happen far too often, and we want to make sure that we're prepared, and we're always going to err on the side of caution and safety for you. So there could be a circumstance where we feel like it's necessary for the police and added police presence. You've gotten those letters home before. We said expect added police presence. This is what's going on in the community. So you might see added police presence. You could also see the school security staff running them. Will just really matter. It really depends on the circumstance. It depends on the threat level. And I think each time we make these decisions, we always, in this 2022, with what we've seen across this country, even though we feel really safe in Lowell, we don't want to be naive to the fact that anything can occur, and it's our responsibility to keep you safe. So you'll see safety officers, you'll see security staff, you'll see police officers, but there's not going to be assumptions made. We'll base our use based on the data we have and the threat level that we assess on at a certain time.
Sorry, just one more thing. But did they also kind of like take into consideration if it did go off and there was a kid that they had to check, would they be able to pat them down? Or because since we all are minors, how would they handle that situation?
So I have worked in districts where we use these daily, at high schools where every student, every day in our high schools go through them. In Philadelphia, they're used as, so there's a pretty efficient protocol for moving through it. There's also a protocol for what goes through and what doesn't, and then there's a protocol if it goes off. You'd be surprised how efficient our security staff and our police officers get. You move through them very quickly. You'll also find that they're very efficient with identifying what's a false alarm versus what's something that requires further investigation. And we get really good at also when do we need to call for help with that investigation, when something looking really complex. It's new here in Lowell, but it's used in a lot of high schools across the country. I think our process and our approach here is we don't think they're necessary on a daily basis for you at the high school. We don't have evidence to suggest that, but we do think they're necessary to have on hand in case of certain circumstances. It's technology available to us, and we believe it would be irresponsible not to have technology available if there's a need for its use.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, so at the high school and probably at other schools in Lowell, we have like entrances that are in between staircases. So would you try to funnel everyone through the main entrance, or would you like somehow figure out how to put the detectors in between the staircases?
So we have more than one, but you're right. That's the downside of moving. When you move to a more secure and the most secure entry and exit of a building, you have less entry and exit. And for Lowell High School, with the number of students moving through, it would be a slower entry. There would be less doors available to come through because we would move everyone through them if there's a need to do so. So depending on what we see as the threat level, we could narrow it down to one door. But we also have more units. We could have it out to multiple doors, but you wouldn't have the same number of doors because right now students access a lot of entry points for Lowell High. You have a lot of students, a big campus. So you would see that change. But the number of doors that are open, the number that are monitored, depends on the threat level again. This will be used on a case-by-case basis, and you can you can think through your experiences in K through 12, and I'm sure you can probably count up on one or two hands the number of times you would have thought that one of these would have been used in the past if we had them available.
I was just curious as to once they get up and going in the buildings, if you know how we do the options-based drill training, if it would be possible for the students to do a drill before it's actually used, so it lessens anxiety that may encompass this.
I think so. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think Casey hit one of my questions pretty well regarding whether or not we have enough to cover, like enough entrances, what sort of the process would be considering the side of the high school. Are there any other questions about this topic?
I was gonna say, I was gonna say I agree with Ms. Del Rossi. I think that's a great idea, and I think a lot of students would appreciate that you're actually taking into consideration like their feelings and how that can make them anxious. So I really like that idea.
Sorry, I just have one more question about like the entryways in these like situations. So like between the freshman academy and the main building, there's obviously an open way. So would you have like, would you station people there possibly? Or like, would you like keep contact? Because I know that kids like walk around the school during in between classes as well.
Typically, if we go to this type of necessary tool, it's done at the point of entry into the building, not every time you move among classes. So usually you do it at the time of arrival, but I say usually because given the fact that it's a response to a threat, it would depend on what the threat and risk assessment is. So depending on what's happening at the community at a given time, perhaps they are mobile and we can move them. We would look to take the advice of our local police department. We would look to take their advice and we would respond accordingly. I think we've all learned not to try to predict what might come into the future with what we've all lived through for the past 2 years. I would say that we've purchased these and will continue to purchase tools to ensure your safety and to be able to commit to your parents that you're going to be safe in school. And if we get any advice from law enforcement into the future of technology that's available to us that could further ensure that, we're going to research it and explore it. These are mobile, so they're threat response. And we have seen, as you've experienced this year, these could be any number of things from community-wide threat, statewide, nationwide threat, or even local to the school. And based on that, that would be the response. We have done in the past, maybe some of you have experienced the even more mobile, which are wands that can do metal detection. So these aren't the stationary that you would see at the airport that are permanent. These are mobile, just like the wands, but they allow us to serve more people because you can walk through them as you do the permanent units. But it's the same concept as you might recall, and maybe you've taken part in some of our events where we use the wands. Same concept is there.
I kind of have another question about the metal detectors. So let's say, similarly to what happened in the fall, if there was an incident where we didn't know, like, where, like, we weren't able to pinpoint exactly what school or which location, would there be, like, enough metal detectors to kind of, like, cover all of the, like, district schools, or would it be, like, would we move them? Like, what's the procedure?
So we haven't purchased 30 of them. And we haven't, and if you think about the entry into Lowell High School, you would even need more than one there. So we haven't, right now, the recommendation for us from the legal experts and the law enforcement experts is not that we would require that number, but we could purchase more if for some reason, as the world continues to evolve and our community continues to evolve, that there's a determination that we have that need. But right now, we haven't assessed that to be the case. So there's where they would be placed, they'd be placed at the areas where we think they're necessary to be placed. And again, that's based on the assessment from the police department. So they would give us that assessment. And we have multiple ways that we go about ensuring safety. So these are new tools. We still have all of the tools that we've already had previously to respond to every threat level. So now we have another approach that we can take, another tool in our tool belt. And what we'll do is each time we work late through the night into the morning to make sure that we can keep our schools safe if there is a threat. And this is another tool that we'll use, and we'll work with law enforcement to say where's it best to deploy them, where's it most important to deploy them. And if there's a need to purchase more, we'll do that as well.
How many is there purchased right now that are in our possession?
I knew you were going to give me that one, Kylie. I don't want to misquote it, so I'm going to have to get you that answer. Less than 30.
And following that question, because we're on the same wavelength, what was the cost, and where is that coming from? Is it a grant, or is it coming from some specific pool of money?
Yeah, I'm going to have to get you a specific report here so I don't get misquoted on the public record, but I'll make sure that I do that for you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I really appreciate your answers, Mr. Superintendent, and all the questions here are really good. I really liked Ms. Del Rossi's suggestion for the drill. Like it's like just as important in like the case of a fire drill or like an active shooter drill. It's a very similar thing. So yeah, any more questions? All good? Okay. Agenda item 1.4, fulfilling the gym requirement with athletics. I spoke very briefly about this with Ms. Desmond, and then I spoke more about it with Miss Martin. She said that it would be referred to the Curriculum and Instruction and Subcommittee. She said it would happen in early March, but I haven't seen anything about it online. So yeah, it was just more of a thing I've seen happen in other districts where they've been able to fulfill the requirement with athletics, whether it's a season or two of sports. And then instead of taking that semester of gym, they can fill in either a class or probably take a full year course, whether it's an AP course, an honors levels course, or if you're reaching the point in the future where we can implement a study hall for maybe seniors who have all of their necessary requirements. I just see it as an overall benefit for students. And I just have a question about what the process would be for implementing such a policy.
I'm going to answer that. So I've been working with head of school Fiato and assistant head of school Rothschilds to look at the graduation requirements, look at how we align as a high school with the Mass Core requirements, and then also to investigate this particular question that Chris posed to me a few weeks ago, I think maybe in January. So we are investigating it with the Department of Ed. What are we able to do? What are we not able to do? And then once we have all of that information, we'll bring it back to the committee.
And is this something that would need to be reviewed with DESE?
Yes, so that's where we are now. We're talking to the Department of Ed to see, is it mandated that we have to provide phys ed? Are there options for us to be able to count organized athletics activities such as, winter sports, fall sports, spring sports, and what the requirements are if we do have that flexibility. So once we have all of that information, we'll be able to bring it back to the committee.
Okay, I see.
If I could add to that, I know there was a lot of interest. I've been trying to move forward with this for, I don't know, over 10 years, I would say. But then I took some time off the committee, and it wasn't always a priority. But we did say in January that we would meet again. I'm not chair of the curriculum subcommittee, but do you have an idea when you would have that information? Because as has been mentioned, many districts do waive it. And I'm thinking in terms of those students who are juniors and seniors next year who need to be making their course selections now, I believe. Is it this week?
Yeah.
I mean, I actually had a parent come up to me and say, what do I do? My son wants to take this dual enrollment class, but if he's required to take another semester of gym, even though he's a multi-sport athlete, so I'm looking under that time frame and trying to get a sense of when do you think we'll have the information that and I know that looking at the graduation requirements and all that, it needs to be part of that, but separate from that would be just that one requirement about if you're an athlete or if you're in ROTC or if you're in dance, you are waived from this gym requirement. So can you give us a better sense of when we'll actually be having that discussion?
So we planned on, or timelined, that we would have the information to the committee the second meeting in April for all of the grad requirements and so forth. But this particular question, I probably can have an answer for our curriculum subcommittee meeting, which is March 30th. So hopefully that's a week. 2 weeks away? 2 weeks
That
away.
would be great,
Yeah.
just to have an idea of what we're working towards. And even if we haven't got all the other aspects, such as the graduation requirements, ironed out, to be able to at least tell students, if you meet these criteria, you don't have to take, this number of phys ed classes. And I think it's always been for me about student engagement. And if you're actively engaged in sports or dance and there are other classes you want to take, electives, art, film, dual enrollment opportunities, this is a way, to hook you, to get students more engaged in school. So I think it's a win. Thank you.
Just kind of add to that, do you think that would be finalized by this year for kids next year? Because I know that they're talking about not being able to change the schedules or anything, which is already stressing parents and students out enough. So would this be implemented so that seniors next year will have that decision?
We would like to see that, so hopefully that is the case. I can't guarantee that the Department of Ed allows us to do it. So there is investigation. We do have to meet standards that the state sets. So that's what we're trying to get clarity on right now, is what is the flexibility? And then oftentimes, if we decide to go in that direction, then our school committee has to take a vote, because oftentimes if we are able to make local changes to requirements, it has to be approved by our school committee. So there is a process involved in all of this.
Also, sorry, one more thing. So I was just recently notified that dance is also going to count as health. So have they looked into gym also counting as health, or is that kind of not possible?
We haven't looked at that. What we were intending with the other components is we took the health standards and made sure that those were covered during those other classes, for exactly the reason that Ms. Doherty mentioned, is that there are lots of students that want to take lots of things, and really you only have one elective slot each semester or each year, right? So we just want to be able to provide students with as much flexibility as possible for them to be able to not only meet the requirements and get all of the information that should be covered in the standards, but be participating in things that really are of interest to them. So, there's a lot to juggle when you want to consider all of those things. But we're not looking at phys ed, a health component in phys ed, because of the standards that are required for the phys ed.
Do you think that would it be possible to like add like curriculum of health into gym so kids could also take that? Because I know that messes people's schedules up.
Yeah, we can look into it, but the phys ed, the standards that are required for phys ed they have a pretty large amount of standards, so to then embed the health standards might be challenging. But we can definitely look at that.
So it would almost be like too much curriculum, basically, all in one. Okay, that makes sense.
Could be. So
All
we
right.
have to look at all of those components.
Thank you.
If I could jump in, because I would really like to get your opinion about this issue. I have some major concerns about eliminating health as a requirement, because my sense is we don't do enough with reproductive information, relationship information, drugs, just healthy relationships, all those things that come under health. To try to have that covered in a show choir class, for example, I think would be diluting some very important information that we need for our students. Whereas the physical education component I felt was an easier transition. If you're a swimmer or you're doing cross country, you're running and you're getting all that physical exercise every day, and part of the coaching for that sport is healthy physical lifestyle things that would go along with physical education. So I'd like to hear, you're all seniors, right? Or juniors, some of you? If you could just tell me, and we could just go down the line, has health class been an experience that you think has been beneficial? And particularly thinking about what you got from K to 8 in terms of those, because I think that we have been lacking in real strong sex education curriculum at the middle school level. So I just, if we could do a quick round robin about what you guys think about that component of losing that piece. Do you want to start? I don't care.
So I remember in my 8th grade year is where we mostly learned about the reproductive system and stuff like that, and we had somebody come in from the program Teen Block to kind of talk about it. So I feel like in middle school I kind of got more of an education on the reproductive system than I did in high school. I did only take health for 1 year, and then after I did switch into RCC, so I don't know if it was covered in Health B because I didn't take it personally, but I would say that I think at the middle school level at least at the school that I went to, they did a pretty good job of explaining it to us in a way that we could comprehend.
What did you get from ROTC about sex education, protection, healthy relationships, those kinds of things?
I wouldn't say that we got much from that. I think it was more geared towards like leadership, etiquette, stuff like that. It would be more of like how to be a better person, I would say, instead of necessarily the actual science of the body and stuff like that.
Thank you.
I'd say K through 4, I don't think I got any sex education, at least what I can remember. Yeah. Middle school, I went to a private middle school, St. Michael's Middle School. We had very slight sex education. I feel like I may have gotten some better ones if I went to a Lowell Public Schools middle school, but I don't really know because I haven't attended one. For high school, I'd say I took health my freshman, sophomore year. I had 2 amazing health teachers. I had Mr. Melanakis and Mr. Heitzman. They're great people. I think we focused more on sex education in Health A, which I took my freshman year, than in Health B, if I remember correctly. Health B was more about being comfortable with yourself and like learning to develop relationships, and it was probably one of the most influential classes I've ever taken in my life. Mr. Heitzman was a great teacher. But yeah, I think we covered it well enough in Health A. As for that not necessarily being covered with show choir or like other art requirements, I think that it's a precaution, or students should be warned, not warned, I don't know if warned is the right word, should be told that they probably will not be getting that component to their component to their health education.
Actually, Teen Block, the organization that we utilize in the middle school, will be providing those lessons during those classes. It's part of the curriculum.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, if there is like proper assistance from like Teen Block and such, then I don't necessarily see an issue with integrating the curriculums, allowing students to take other courses rather than having to take health in their respective years.
So yeah, I also had to go with Chris. I also went to a Catholic school in middle school, so I didn't really get a lot of the health component. But when I got to high school, I definitely agree with him about the sex education more in your Health A class, and then Health B, I definitely learned more about like your well-being and stuff. But then I also taking the AP psychology class right now, and I feel like I'm getting a lot of more details of what we learned throughout the health as well, on top of other factors. But I think other than that, I think it's pretty good. And sadly, Mr. Heitzman retired, sadly. But I think there's still amazing health teachers, because I had 2 other health teachers besides him, and I thought they were great. So
I also went to a Catholic middle school, so I actually didn't get much education there. But I was also thinking, because I also took Health A, but it was remote, so my experience was entirely different, and I don't think I really learned that much, to be honest with you, about all that stuff. We kind of focused more on like mental health and that stuff, especially during that time, which I think was also beneficial. But I think it'd be great if they could incorporate something like with the program you were saying, maybe like in a freshman seminar, because that's when you are at your youngest and you're still maturing. And I feel like that's when kids really need to like learn about that, especially before they get into like the big building and they're integrated into that fully. So I think that'd be a great idea of like trying to maybe in freshman seminar like really push that on them so they really understand it, especially when you're in like a mixed class with like boys and girls. So kind of like to ease it to be less awkward and stuff. I think that'd be a great time for them. So if teamwork could come in and do some classes with the freshman seminars, I think that'd be super beneficial and they might get more out of it.
Hi, so I went to the Robinson Middle School, so I only had health for my 5th grade year. Sadly, during our 6th grade year, our health teacher got cancer, so we could not have a health teacher. So I didn't really learn much about sex education or anything like that, but I definitely learned a little bit in high school, but it wasn't like the best because I was in a class mixed with, I was a freshman at the time, and I was mixed in a class with seniors and juniors who really didn't care about the class, so it was really just hard to learn. And then Health B was definitely a lot more about like mental health, how to deal with different things like that. But that was during remote, so I guess it really wasn't all that. I wasn't the greatest, but I still definitely learned a couple of things.
I also took, for Health A, it was definitely, I learned about sex education, and I had Miss Connolly, so she definitely like, did a great job of like teaching us that. And then I also had Mr. Heisman for Health B, and it was also, of course, about well-being, kind of being comfortable in yourself and relationship stuff, so it was definitely good.
Well, you all did a great job today. Thank you all for coming, and we are going to head into our next meeting. So I don't know if there are any final comments from our committee members before we close for tonight, but it's 6:30, so we're going to have to jump into our next meeting.
I had one quick question. In middle school or in any part, did you ever learn about the dangers of vaping and the things that your population, your student population is really exposed to now?
Particularly for me, I learned a lot about like opioid usage last year, just being in like a school district that kind of has a lot of that. And I thought that we covered that a lot more than sex education, which may have been even more beneficial. I mean, that other component would be beneficial, but we learned a lot about that last year. Yeah, this was at the high school last year during remote learning. So that part, I did learn a lot about that stuff. We watched like a lot of different videos and stuff, kind of just trying to educate us and push us away from it, so that we really knew like the long-lasting effects. I mean, I guess I remember like them showing like a picture of like the aftermath of using this, and it was like so scary and stuff. So I feel like they do a good job of promoting us to like stay away from that, which really helps.
Whoops. I can't necessarily speak on middle schools, but I'd say definitely in our health classes at the high school, there is a focus on staying away from drugs and such as like vaping, opioids, and the causes and like social pressures that can lead to those behaviors.
thank you, and I know what it's like to be a St. Michael's person. They don't talk about anything. And
I just want to thank you all for all you are bringing to this. This is so important, and your honesty in sharing this is going to help us form what we do. So thank you for being committed to doing this. It's so, so important, so thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate all the questions and questions, comments, everything. Thank you guys.
Motion to adjourn?